In this video, we will go through the source code content preparation for the AI 102 exam. By the end of this video, you would have known three things: where to find the source code content, what are the different response types that you'll find in the exam, and finally, when nothing else works, how do you go about guessing the answers? So let's begin. In my personal observation, I see that there are two key parts where you can find source code content that is very relevant to the exam. The first, and relatively the more expensive way of doing it, is to buy the exam preparation modules from Microsoft, which is presented to you on the screen when you're booking for your exam. The next best option, in my opinion, is to go through the practice test that Microsoft offers and then go through the links that are given under the preparation section and understand the source code better. Within that practice exam related preparation links that you'll find for the incorrect answers that you've done, you will find some cases two different types of links. One that will take you back to the module that you've done earlier, the content, and the other to the documentation part on the Microsoft's official documentation pages. Now, I have observed that going to the training part or the documentation part is way more relevant than going back to the module that you've prepared. There's so much of source code content, and I found personally that it's very daunting to go through the entire piece. So here's what worked out for me. I began to look at the content from the lens of two separate categories of responses. The first type is where you have some form of a URI type of a response, and the second one is the CLI or the command prompt level of responses. When I looked at the URI type of responses, I have seen a pattern emerge. For example, does it have a put, get, or post right at the beginning of the URI? In other words, is it an API call? Within that URI-based response types, what does the header section have and what does the body have? Within the header section, do you see the subscription types? Do you see the API versions? Do you see the model versions? Do you see the cognitive services links? Pay close attention to what happens in the header section. Similarly, when you look at the body part, you will also see that there are key value pairs, and in some cases, it's a little bit more than that. Now, go through that content, go through the different elements that make up the body and the header section, and you will see the pattern too. Now, the other part of the other kind of response that I've seen is the CLI or the command prompt. Questions around containers, for example, or Azure SDK instead of using the GUI. Those are the type of content that you'll find there. Within that, I found that going straight to the content example section gave me the most relevant information. It could help me understand whether it's a resource group that I need to call as part of command prompt, or is it directly the services? Is there a combination of both? And going through the content with that particular lens, saying is it URI or CLI, helped me quite a bit in my understanding of the source code content. Now, there are times when you may not know the real answer, but you have some guesswork. And the assumption is that you've done a bit of work in the launch exercise section by building the resource group, the services, and calling the services, and etc. Now, if you have done that homework, that basic preparation, you're better equipped to guess the answer. For example, if you're presented with a URI kind of a question and fill in the blanks within that, and you're asked to say, pick the right option to fill that particular blank, you could take a moment and go back to your understanding of the URI and figure out, for example, if they're asking an endpoint, from experience that endpoints are like web pages. They have a full link that you can copy paste on the browser, and you'll go there. In other words, it won't start with mcr dot or slash and the folder name. So Just by understanding that kind of information, you can now get rid of the options that have anything that doesn't look like a web page. Getting rid of that option will simply reduce the number of options that you have as the most likely answer, and increases your chance of passing the exam. On the other side, there is another set of question type that's called case study. And for these question types, there is a very good guesswork that I use. It's just the most optimal one that I could figure out so far. If I have very little understanding of the most optimal response, I would simply look at the answers for each question as I move forward. Again, remember, in case study, you can't go back and answer the question again. You have to only move forward. So I would look at the responses and I say, 50% of the responses are on one side of the spectrum and the other 50% on the other. In other words, they're almost mutually exclusive. Once I identify two mutually exclusive set of responses, each time I'm encountering a similar concept or identical in some cases, and the question is this approach to getting a particular task done correct or not? Yes or no? I will pick one response from the one side of the spectrum, and for the next time I come across that question or a similar question, I'll pick the other one. The idea is to, the logic really here is to come up with a strategy where we may not be getting full marks or 0 marks, but rather 50%, because you briefly know that one of those two sets of answers is the right one, and by mixing and matching along the way, you increase the likelihood of getting maybe close to 50% of those responses right. Remember, you can only guess if you understand the underlying concepts and you've forgotten. You can only guess if you've done the hands-on experience part, whether by practicing it on launch and exercise section or by your own self. If you haven't done both of these things, guesswork is probably just a randomness at play. I hope this video helped you, and I wish you the best of luck in attempting the AI 102 exam and getting certified as Microsoft Certified Azure AI Engineer Associate. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.